Cameras in court are at the discretion of the judge. In high-profile cases, photographers and camera operators are often allowed in for a period to film before the day's proceedings get underway to allow them to film as the accused enters the court. But once the court proceedings proper begin, simply with the arrival of the magistrate or judge, they are asked to either stop filming or leave the court. In today's multimedia environment, where reporters are camera operators, photographers are reporters, and everyone has a camera in their phone, South Africa takes a tough line. Anyone not following the rules will be found in contempt of court. What made covering Oscar Pistorius' case more difficult was a clear move on the part of the magistrate to ensure Pistorius never entered the court until the magistrate arrived, with the magistrate signalling from the bench at Pistorius that he should leave just before he announced every adjournment. For media who scrambled and queued and fought to get permission to film in the main court and waited during long delays to film the start of each day's proceedings to begin, there was frustration and anger at the special treatment offered to Oscar Pistorius. 3 times I managed to get into court. 3 times I failed in my attempt to film Oscar Pistorius either arriving or leaving. I spoke to a South African cameraman colleague with long experience of covering courts in South Africa after we were ejected once more. So what just happened in there? I mean, is that normal?
No, this is very unusual. I mean, he is a huge celebrity in this country, and it seems that the law that is normally for criminals doesn't apply to Oscar Pistorius. I mean, he is getting preferential treatment. Not only is he in a normal prison, but he seems to be in a prison that is different to any other prison in South Africa. It's close to his home. He's familiar with Pretoria. His family are nearby, so they seem to be slotting him into a celebrity status prisoner.
So tell me what just happened. I mean, the media, we all got accredited. We're all told, you know, you're photographers, you're allowed in. The rules are that until the magistrate comes in, you're allowed to film. What would normally happen?
Well, I mean, first off, it's up to the magistrate, obviously, and we've been given rules and regulations as to how we conduct ourselves when we are in there. Just before the magistrate comes in, we are allowed to film. As soon as he sits down, and everyone has to leave. With Oscar, depending on his timing, whether he gets in before the magistrate or not, we cannot film him coming in. We have to point our cameras down, or we have to make sure that we are not recording and leave. I mean, so he seems to be making sure that he's in before Oscar every time. Yeah, we got, on one occasion we managed to get a shot of him, but if we put anything to air after that, you know, we're in contempt of court. So we've got to be very, very careful in the media as to what we can show, and our organisation will not take any chance when it comes to Oscar.
Okay, you're pretty annoyed by it?
I am a bit. I mean, it's a very stressful environment to work in. We are scrumming for every single space that we're trying to get into that court. It's so hard for us even to get access, let alone access the outside of the court. And you know, with the popularity of the story, it's, you know, tempers are flared. It's not good for morale, and we are struggling amongst hundreds of local and international media.
Covering this case has confirmed once more why it is we are journalists. First draft of history and all of that for sure, but no, it's not for the glamour. This is Ginny Stein outside Pretoria Magistrates Court for Correspondent's Report.
Our Europe correspondent Philip Williams and his cameraman...
Okay, so that little snippet from ABC Radio National may explain some features of the Oscar Pistorius, aka Crybaby Bladerunner case. Apparently 6 times in the last 3 months the police have been called to his apartment for loud domestic situations. Apparently he lives behind a 10-foot wall with an electrified fence and armed guards patrolling the Enclave, the gated community. Apparently, there are 2.5 million firearms licensed and registered in Sooth EffriKan to the people who live in fear that they may be robbed by people who apparently can't see any legitimate way to make a living, so they take to crime. And apparently, Oscar Pistorius' story is that he woke up in the middle of the night and he stumped down to the toilet and he thought that there was a burglar in there, so he fired 4 times through the door. And then he went back to his bedroom and he couldn't find his girlfriend in the bed, and then he became worried, and then he got a cricket bat and then he beat the door in, and then he found his girlfriend where he presumed there to be a burglar, and then he carried her out and called his relatives, and they called the police, they called the ambulance, and by the time the police arrived, the medical services were already there trying to resuscitate the dead girlfriend. That's Oscar Pistorius' story, and his theory is that because he thought that it was a burglar, therefore it's not murder to shoot through the door of a toilet when you know there's somebody on the other side. The police's story is that there was no sign of any forced entry, that Oscar and his girlfriend were the only people in the apartment, that neighbours in the early hours of the morning from 300 metres away heard loud, angry shouting coming from the Pistorius apartment. Now, I used to live in a village and my neighbours used to hear me and my wife screaming and shouting at each other at least a kilometre. I can hear my neighbour shouting at his sheepdog from a kilometre, even when there's trucks on the highway audible at 1.5 kilometres in a different direction, and the neighbour shouts louder than the trucks do. So I've no doubt that late at night, Oscar Pistorius' neighbours could hear him shouting at his girlfriend, and they say the shouting was going on for a while, and then there was a couple of shots, and then there was more shouting, and then there was a couple of more shots. And the police, cunning buggers, they've pieced the door back together and they've sat there and figured out the tracks the bullets took through the door, and they've figured out from the entry and exit wounds on the body what position the woman was in when she was shot. 3 times out of the 4 shots hit her. 1 in the hip, 1 in the hand and 1 in the head. And they figured out that Oscar Pistorius was actually wearing his artificial legs when he was standing up to his full height when he fired through the door. And because he thought he was shooting at a burglar, and burglars are obviously poor, and in Sooth EffriKan the poor people are the black people, and black people don't matter as much as white people, especially if the white people are rich and they've got a gun, Oscar Pistorius has been let out on bail, although he's still charged with murder. Just for an alternative window into the situation, the detective handling the case, a Detective Botha, he was stood aside because he's on charges of murders, 7 charges of murders, when he and a mate were drunk and they fired on a minivan and killed 7 people. So there's a lot of murder about in Sooth EffriKan, and maybe the story is to set a thief, you set a thief to catch a thief. So perhaps the idea of setting a murderer to catch a murderer isn't such a ridiculous idea, but it's how they do things in Sooth EffriKan. And all I can say is it's a typical example of why keeping a gun for self-defence allows any argument within any situation to be suddenly and dramatically and tragically escalated into something that makes no sense to anybody. If Oscar Pistorius didn't want Reba Steenkamp as a girlfriend, he should have just told her to piss off. My personal belief is that anybody who's stubborn enough and pig-headed enough to waste 10,000 or 20,000 hours of their life trying to run faster or swim faster or jump higher or throw further or compete in any other useless physical endeavour is quite possibly the sort of egomaniac who just wants to be the best, who can't stand anybody else disagreeing with them, and who gets the shits when anybody else gets more attention. And since he put on his crybaby routine at the Paralympics when he reckoned the person he was running against was cheating by using overlong blades, even though all the medical sporting experts in the world said, no, the blades are the right length for the fella, he just runs faster than you do, Oski. Ever since the Crybaby Paralympian Bladerunner episode, Oscar Pistorius hasn't been getting quite so much publicity, but Reba Steenkamp, who used to be a model that nobody'd ever heard of, she's been on a reality TV show. So Oscar's been getting shittier and shittier the past 3 months because the girlfriend's been getting more press. And so on Valentine's Day, they had a bloody argument. And when she wouldn't come back to bed, he got shitty. When he got shitty, he went and shot the fucking door down. That'll bloody teach her, won't it, eh? Oh, shit. 9mm handgun versus a modern door in a modern apartment. There's not much left of the person who's locked in the toilet. Like, it wasn't as if she had anywhere she could go to get out of his line of fire. And if he had to beat the door down with a bloody cricket bat, he wasn't shooting at the lock anyway, was he? He was shooting at the centre of the door. The sort of moron who thinks that'll teach him. The sort of paranoid, overcompensated inferiority complex wrapped up into a control freak who thinks they have the right to self-ish defence. Because they think themself matters more than anybody else on the planet. And from their personal perspective, it probably does, but not from any objective perspective, not from a God's eye view. So, that's the view of Crybaby Bladerunner, Oscar Pistorius, the bloke who shot his girlfriend on Valentine's Day because she was getting more attention than he was in the media. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.